Greg here with MaritimeGardening.com, and it's middle of April 2021, and I thought I'd do my first garden tour of the year, brought to you by my sponsor, Vessi Seeds and Safer's Gardening Products. Almost all the seeds in my garden were provided by Vessi Seeds this year, and last year and the year before that. And the few products I use for dealing with pests, I get from Safer's Gardening Products. More on that later. So last year I started doing the beginning of my garden tours in front of my goldfish pond. I'd love to show you my fish. They did make it through the winter, but it's just the sun's not up and it's kind of cold, and wherever it is they go when it's cold, that's where they are. You can't see them right now. A number of days ago we had a nice sunny day and they were all up moving around. I didn't find, normally at the end of the winter I find like one dead floater sort of thing, but this year that wasn't the case. Looks like all the goldfish made it through the winter. That's with no pump, no this, no that, no nothing. Just a hole I dug in the ground and stuck some fish in. So I did a couple of videos last year on how I made my goldfish pond, and people are like, you have to have a pump, they're going to starve for oxygen, and so on and so forth. Maybe I'll speak a little bit more on why I think they didn't die this winter in another video, because it's got nothing to do with gardening. Let's go have a look at the garden. Hopefully the wind isn't too bad for somewhat decent sound quality. This is just the time I have to make this video. I got to do it now if it's going to happen. So let's go. All right, so here we are at the entrance of the garden. Last fall I planted garlic in this bed here outside the garden enclosure. They're all up about 6 inches. And all my garlic pretty much is in that situation. All right, let's go this way over here. So I got some things growing underneath the domes here. This garden here, I think I planted spinach and lettuce. And spinach is growing. I don't see any of the lettuce coming up yet, or if it came up, it got eaten. There is something I've noticed. You can barely see any spinaches, a couple right down the end there. But all the spinach was up about a week ago, and that's mostly disappeared. So there's something, you can see some right here, right? So there's something getting at my spinach, and I have no idea what it is. Because I've never found spinach to be problematic where slugs and snails are concerned. I find the biggest problem, I've never found anything to go at my spinach. So I have to think it's a vole, because there was a line of spinach here a week ago. Now there's just a couple left. So something's eating my spinach. I'm going to guess a vole. Underneath this dome, I got kale growing out. On the right-hand side is my own sort of wild kale, whatever you call that, Siberian kale. On the left hand is a kind of Scotch curly kale. I didn't plant that as thickly. I mean, when I use my own seeds, I have thousands and thousands of seeds, so I seed heavily. That's why they've come in so well. With these ones, I spaced them out. But there's still at least 24 kale growing out here. It's a lot. You know, they don't look like much now, but they'll be pretty big, magnificent plants as the season goes on. And I can see there's a little bit of flea beetle damage, even though it's this early in the season. Yeah, see these little holes in the foliage. That's flea beetle. Underneath this dome, I got more spinach, and I planted a kind of dandelion down the side, but I don't see them growing yet. So there is one that's a wild dandelion there, but I planted some sort of what's it called? Italian punto dandelion, I think the variety is called. I don't see them, but that could just mean they need another week or so. You just never know with these things. But certainly the spinach is growing over here. I don't know what that weed is there, but the spinach is growing. We got more garlic growing here. Underneath here, last year I had one of my lettuce plants go to seed, and it was a variety, open pollinated variety, so I saved the seeds, but I had no confidence in them, so I just threw them all over the place here. Now the larger plants you see growing here are parsnips that I guess never got picked. They must have been so small I didn't notice them. But the stuff that's lighter in color, lime green, the smaller, lighter colored stuff, that's lettuce from that plant that I saved the seeds from. I can't remember what the variety is, but it's some sort of heirloom lettuce. Tasted pretty good. So that definitely works. I literally just threw them everywhere and put the lid down. That was probably 4 weeks ago, and they're growing. So that's kind of cool. So I'll definitely make sure to save the seeds off a couple of these this year as well, because I'm totally impressed with that approach. Over here, last year I grew French sorrel in this bed. In the fall, I don't know, maybe October, I dug it out and I put it in this bed because this is kind of shady spot in the garden. Things don't grow so well. But look at them. This was one of the first things that came up this spring of all the different perennial plants I have. Came in ahead of rhubarb, came in ahead of asparagus, came in ahead of lovage, right? This thing came in first. This and the other one I've got over there. I'll show you that in a second. So, you know, again, this is not, you know, something you'd make a salad from. It's kind of a sharp tasting thing, but you add it with things. Very low maintenance, pretty much pest-proof, perennial green, right? So just one more easy garden. Don't have to do anything here this year. All I got to do every year is cover this with a mulch. And these were completely covered in mulch. They just found their way through. Here I've got these, what do they call? Bloody dock, that's what it's called. Another green, similar sort of family. Kind of a citrusy taste, great in soup, great to add to, you know, your Swiss chard, or if you're going to do cooked greens, you can add it in. These plants didn't amount to much last year because I planted them from seed. But I mean, the size these are at is about, you know, it took almost a season last year to get them to this size. Remember, this is all the growth that started. This is the growth we've had so far this year, right? These died right back down to nothing, came up through the mulch. You know, when I started these from seed, it probably took till like September for them to be this size, and they're already this size, and nothing else is growing in the garden really, right? So this bloody dock, if you can get seeds for it, go to a place with heirloom seeds. I didn't get these from Vessie's. I can't remember where I got them from, but this is just a great, and also if you know someone that's got them, you can just divide these up, just like you would a hosta. Get a piece, right? And then you divide yours up. You can treat them just like that's the way they grew too. They spread out just like a hosta. Kind of ornamental anyway, but you can use them. It's a cookable green, very low maintenance, very easy to grow green. Here's some more of it here. This is where I initially just put a line of seeds down this little box, and I plucked some of them out and put them in this box, and tried to space them a bit over here, right? And just cover this with leaves in the fall, and they all found their way up through the leaves, no problem. A couple weeds there, no problem. Just pluck those out. But yeah, so I got all the bloody dock I'm going to need, that's for sure. When you cook this, it goes really good with borscht. When you cook it, it makes the water turn a bit purple. A little bit of an update on perennials here, just for people that you can get a sense of where my garden is in terms of things developing. There's hardly any buds, hardly any signs of life happening with this grapevine, right? Grapevine hasn't even woken up yet, right? So the grapevine still doesn't know it's spring, but hopefully a few more weeks that'll change. The rhubarb is starting to crown up a little bit, right? That's where I am with my rhubarb. And of course, different rates of growth for different plants, right? This one's got this much development. This one's barely gotten started, right? Seems like the further you go this way, the less development there is. There's another one starting to poke up through, right? The height of the season, this whole thing is just a mass of rhubarb, right? A peek of the state of the development of the buds on my, this is a Sweet 16 apple tree, right? That's what the buds look like right now. That's where we are in terms of development, right? So still pretty early going in terms of development, very early spring. This is my asparagus garden. I put the mulch on pretty heavy last fall. Let's just move it aside here and see if we can see anything happening. Here's a dandelion. But I don't really see any signs of life here yet. I don't find my asparagus is one of the earlier things in my garden. It tends to come up after some other things. So I'd say the asparagus still needs some more time to start developing. This lovage is starting to poke up. That's what it looks like very early in the season. This is like a perennial celery would be the best way to describe it. I actually want to dig this up and move it from here. Probably do that in the next few days. I don't like this spot for it. Lovage, it grows like 6 feet high, and it gets up into this tree and messes with the airflow and the sunlight for this apple tree. So it's really not, I really had no idea what I was getting into when I planted this thing. But you know, this crown is over a foot wide now. and it grows like 6 feet high. One lovage plant will give you all the celery you need for an entire spring, summer, and fall of culinary delights. Right? If you need really, celery is not a food, it's a flavor in a sense, right? No one ever lived off of celery. So basically this is celery in all the ways that matter. One plant, you stick it in the ground, and for at least 3 months of the year, every year, you've got all the celery you want. So you can't go wrong with lovage. And yeah, it's starting to grow. It's one of the earlier things in the garden. Blueberries, that's the state of the buds on my blueberries right now, right? Just so you can compare with your garden. I think in my garden plan I plan to put Swiss chard here this year. So I planted some underneath this little dome. Swiss chard doesn't mind being moved. So they started growing, right? That's Swiss chard right there. Looks like some signs of mole activity here. I might have to set up a little mouse trap or something. I really don't mind moles too much, but sometimes they can really mess with your seedlings. They don't eat them, they just frig the soil up and interrupt the root. They really are not after your plants, but just through their mining activity, they can mess your plants up. So I'll keep an eye on this. If the plants and the mole are getting along, I'll leave the mole alone. And if they're not, the mole will be going to mole heaven. Anyway, Swiss chard, this was just planted a week ago. It's growing under the dome. All the little plants I stuck in here from my little seed nursery. The kale, carrot. This one is parsnip, and that is, geez, I cannot remember the name of it. Salsify. They're all coming along fine. If you saw that, I did a video a few weeks ago just talking about these, and that's the sort of how much growth they've put on since then. I took the lid off and I'm just letting them, letting them deal with the environment. They seem to be doing fine. I have a dome on this bed, but it's just to warm it up. I can't remember what I'm going to plant here. I think I'm planting broccolini, artwork broccolini. Great, multi-harvest variety of broccoli. So I'm just warming the soil up. I'll probably plant that in the next few days under that little dome there. I've got this bed here. What the heck did I plant here? I just planted it the other day. This is all onion sets. So a few nights ago I planted 100 onions. So I got most of them in this bed. I got some of them tucked into other places. But this is onion. I just put this here because I was taking it out of storage, but it doesn't need to be there. Onions don't need to be covered or protected or anything. This time of year you just stick them in the ground and let them do the thing. I got some parsnips planted here underneath these plastic squares. They haven't germinated yet, but I imagine the next week or so that'll be the case. Someone asked me how often I water my, I've mentioned this in previous videos, but I think it was Dave Chapman, I think, asked me about that. Under the domes or any one of these sort of microclimates, maybe once a week. It's kind of a closed system, right? Any evaporation that happens, it sort of rains back down off the plastic into the soil. So really I just keep an eye on things, and about once a week if it needs it, right? It really depends on how things look. It's not like the plants don't have any size, so it's not like the plants are really sucking the water out of the ground, right? It's more of, just evaporation. But at least with the domes, it's sort of a closed system, right? So you don't get a lot of, even though you have evaporation, you also have condensation. So it just the water sort of stays in the system. With these plastic squares, they tend to need watering more often because you get a degree of sort of raining back down, but it's not as tight a closed system as the domes. This garden here has a dome on it, but I'm just warming it up. I'm going to plant beets here on this other weird design of a dome. Some of you may recognize this. This is the thing I had over my rosemary. Zone 8 hardy rosemary. This is zone 6 to help them survive the winter. I actually did a little modification at the back of it. I put these pieces of black wood to hold heat. Anyway, I'll show you those at the end of this video. Here I planted some cabbage, I think. Got some variety of cabbage I'm going to grow in this bed. They're not up yet. Well, no, there's some signs of life. little bit of signs of, yeah, no, they're up. So that's the cabbage. I'm almost dead certain that's the cabbage. Because they're up. So I got about an inch of growth on those. So what I'll do with them is I'll grow them in this until they're, a certain height. And then I'll pluck them up and distribute them throughout this bed, right? It's just another way. Instead of having a big dome, you just have a little thing like this. This bed here's got garlic. They're coming up, a lot of them. I covered this with leaf mulch, and about half of it is blown off. So I think the first time I mow my lawn, I'm going to grab some of the grass clippings. Grass clippings don't tend to blow away. So I'll have to, this is a really windy corner of the garden, as you can see, and maybe even here. So yeah, I'll have to put something on here. Like grass clippings tend to really stay in place. And then over here we've got a couple of these Egyptian walking onions coming up pretty good, pretty strong. This bed had Egyptian walking onions in it last year, and I think I had onions or garlic or something like that in the main garden, and I tucked in the Egyptian walking onions around the sides. See how they're big? So those are the last year's Egyptian walking onions. I thought I'd just leave those so they could make seeds. But all the baby Egyptian walking onions, I planted them in the middle of this garden. You can see them poking up through the seaweed, right? There's one right there. All right, so this whole thing will be Egyptian walking onions. It's just an experiment because they're just such a great little onion to use. I mean, the onion part is like a shallot, and of course you can use the greens. But I like the idea of having an onion that grows, and I don't have to buy it. Like already, it's April, and I have a onion flavored thing I can pull out of the garden and use in an omelet or egg salad sandwich or whatever, right? Because these are perfectly edible right now, right? So yeah, I think I'm just gonna leave this garden to be an Egyptian walking onion garden. Just leave it, take care of itself, sort of thing, and see how that works for a few. I got a large enough garden that I can play around with that, right? But the idea to just have a perennial bed of onions. And these Egyptian walking onions, I mean, you can see the ones that, these were not the plant has its sort of main roots, but then it makes these sort of baby bulbils, little tiny, teeny tiny onion looking things. You plant those and they come up the previous year like this. You plant those in the fall, right? They fall off the plant. But this is like the mother and this is the baby. But the mother seems to come back. I don't know how many times it'll do that. But I mean, look, it's April and I've got greens. Nice, right? And that's what they're there for. I wouldn't take all the greens off one of these plants, but I'd take maybe one or two to use in something off, take one off each plant, right? You're gonna get, everything you need for whatever dish you're making. So yeah, the Egyptian walking onion, I gotta say, I'm pleased with that. For those that may have been concerned, it looks like the lingonberries given to me by Whiffletree Farms made it through the winter, and they look really good. I mean, really nice. Looks like we're going to have a good year. There are different heights. That's the way they came. These ones were the biggest, these the most expensive ones you'd buy. Corral, I think, is the Corral. But you have to have more than one variety for them to pollinate properly. So there was 3 different varieties I got, and each one was different size, right? But they all have survived the winter, and they're all doing fine. And they look like they're putting on new growth. Seems to be the new growth is darker in color than the old growth. That's what it seems like to me anyway. So we've got some new growth. So I think they're supposed to give you 2 yields of berries over the course of a season. So we'll see what happens with that. But I'm very pleased to see that these are growing. And this one even looks like it's, look at that. Looks like it's colonizing a little bit, right? So that's promising. Yeah, just a little follow up here of the rosemary that I had. So I had it underneath that little plastic dome, and in addition to the wood I had the back of the dome facing south this way, I had these painted black bricks in amongst the rosemary. And I mean, if it hadn't survived, this would be brittle and these needles would be falling off. So as far as I can tell, It survived the winter and it's going to come back really strong and healthy this year. And for those of you worrying about the paint getting into the soil, I only painted the tops of the bricks, all right? Don't worry about it, right? But I thought if they were black like that, they'd absorb more heat. And so the cold winter days, if there was any kind of sun at all, I could capture and hold some of that heat here. And it seems to have worked. I think what I would do in the future year was actually have bricks like all the way around each plant like that to create a real protective heat sink around each plant. I think that'll work. Keep the soil warm and just hold heat during the winter months. But yeah, looks like it worked. All right, so anyway, we better wrap this up before the wind picks me up and blows me away. That's where we are in the middle of April 2021. If you want to help support my channel and everything I'm doing here with the YouTube channel and the podcast, check out my sponsors, Vessi Seeds and Safer's Gardening Products. Vessi Seeds, you can go online, vessis.com, and use my coupon code GAVS21. Get free shipping. Details are in the description box of this video. Safer's, you can buy their stuff everywhere. So wherever it is, just get it. I use the products I've used is BTK, Slug and Snail Killer, and Safer's End All. It's just a insecticidal spray. Those are the things I use when I need to. If I don't need them, I don't use them. Right? That's the way we do things, right? So anyway, I hope they found that video interesting. If you did, please like, share, subscribe. Check out my podcast, maritimegardening.com, and until next time, get out there, get at it, have fun in your garden. Thanks for watching.